built in, and I think we've got most of the folks who are going to make it today. It's a small group, so I'm going to pick on you to get some answers and try to draw from each other's experiences just a little bit. Today's class, today's collaborative learning series class is called Managing More Than Just Accounts. We will be talking about managed accounts and the associated requirements and the tracking of those things. Best practices. Oh, if my slideshow would show you. There we go. Hi, Brandy Harvey. Most of you have worked with me in one capacity or another. I think we have a couple of ladies on the call who I have not had the pleasure of working with. I am a practice management coach and the new client implementation specialist here at Key Management Group. Next to my older picture here is a map of the participants that are with us today. All of those in red are existing practice management clients across the country. We actually have a couple more dots I think we need to get added here, which is exciting. Those of you in yellow are practices that have joined us today, and if you've signed up in the last 48 hours or so, you may not be on the map. But this should be pretty reflective of who we have on the call. Let me take a moment to let everybody say hello. If you can just share with everybody where you're located and what your position is in the practice you work for so that everyone can get a sense for who else is on the call, that would be great. Carla, can I pick on you first? You're at the top of my attendees list. You may need to unmute yourself on your end, Carla.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
My name is Carla DeShazer. I'm here in Southfield. I'm part of the Cornerstone Group, and I'm the admin for 5 different advisors here in Southfield, Michigan.
Perfect. Thank you. And Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello.
Would you mind introducing yourself to everybody on the call today?
I'm Jennifer Matthews, and I am the admin assistant for Troy, and I assist 3 of the advisors here in Troy, Michigan.
Thank you. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. I'm Sarah Leffler. I work for Corey Neesmith here in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm his client service manager.
Perfect. Thank you, ma'am. And Marlo, I will introduce you in just a moment, but I have unmuted your microphone just so you're aware.
Okay.
All right. So like I said, we have a small group today. I think that's everybody at the moment. If I see anybody else pop on, I'll call them out and have them say hello. So, well, my slideshow's not working again. There we go. Here's an outline of today's class. I'm going to share with you our objectives, introduce you to our content expert, that's Marlo, I just brought her on, and share with you a little bit about how she does things, as well as some best practices to make sure you're meeting those annual compliance requirements for tracking. Excuse me. We'll have a little bit of group participation, I hope, and some reminders before you move on with your day. So for today's objectives, I want to define for you the types of managed accounts and why it is that we need to review and track those reviews. What are the most recent changes concerning managed accounts, and share some best practices around the documentation and the use of the tracking tool. So what are managed accounts? I pulled this directly from Compass, so it's their language. The Ameriprise managed accounts feature a personalized asset-based advisory relationship that enables you to offer a broad range of sophisticated investment solutions for implementing an optimal asset allocation strategy. That just made me kind of shake my head when I read it. It's a great technical description of what managed accounts are, but let's talk about it in a little bit easier terms. Managed accounts are accounts that have a lot of great options for clients to choose how much involvement they want to have in the management of their accounts, as well as the involvement of the advisor in the trading and management of the money that's in those. So that involvement has some responsibilities and a fee to go along with them. So we have to make sure that the advisor is doing a good job of checking suitability, that is making sure that the type of account is still right for the client, and that the accounts are being traded appropriately, and that they're essentially proving that they're earning that fee that's being charged for those accounts. Ameriprise has 7 different kinds of managed accounts that they define in the compliance material. SPS Advantage, most folks are familiar with. Active portfolios, that's also relatively common. One that's rising in popularity is SPS Advisor. That's the managed account that has discretionary control, so the advisor doesn't have to reach out to the client to get permission to do trades. And then there are some separately managed accounts. They're accounts that are held in a very different way and don't fit in the same mold as SPS and Active Portfolio. Those are the Select Separate Accounts, Investor Unified Accounts, Access Accounts, and Vista Accounts. Those all tend to fall under that SMA or Separately Managed Account umbrella or label. The SPS Advantage, let me go back to that for just a moment. Those are the accounts that the client wants to have decision-making power and have regular trading in. So that's going to be the one you're going to see quite often. Active Portfolios, conversely, is managed by a management firm through home office, so the client doesn't have to make regular decisions, but the decision-making power isn't on the advisor, so it's not considered the same type of discretion. That's where the SPS Advisor is sort of a middle road between SPS that has full control between the advisor and the client, and Active Portfolios, which is on home office. SPS Advisor has control by the advisor, not needing to check back in with the client. So hopefully that helps clarify a little bit if some of you are less familiar with some of these account types. So why do we need to review and track them? As I mentioned, there's a responsibility for managing those accounts and a fee that goes along with it. So we have to make sure that the account is still suitable for the client and their needs. Documentation makes sure that the advisor is meeting that responsibility to review it regularly, make the trades that are needed, make sure that it's still right for the client. Annual review documentation is required for all forms of managed accounts, and the same review sheet can be used for all of them. In order to make sure we don't miss anybody or miss any one account in the documentation, we have to make sure that we're doing a good job of tracking those reviews, not to let any clients or accounts slip through the cracks, and make sure that the advisor's obligations are being met on an annual basis. There were some changes around these accounts in the last 6 months to a year. SPS deliverables are no longer a requirement. Some advisors are still choosing to do deliverables, that is still compliant, or they may choose to use the managed accounts annual review template to document their review without the added effort of a deliverable or a letter that goes out to the client separately. That was a change that took effect in January of this year. So those of you that were around in 2015 will remember the need to get deliverables done for every client before December 31st of last year, but starting in January of this year, that's no longer a must-do, it's an option. They made some changes to the no trade policy for all types of SPS accounts. It used to be that if there were no trades for, I believe, 4 years, that home office prompted moving those accounts to brokerage, because what it means is the client doesn't really want to have regular trading, so the account isn't suitable. All of these account types are supposed to have some kind of regular trading. So they changed that trade policy and brought the amount of time between trades to 2 1/4 years, or 27 months, without a solicited trade, and that's new language as well. Before it was trades in general. Now they're saying if the client goes 27 months without a trade that was prompted by the advisor, a solicited trade suggested by the advisor, then the account is no longer suitable and they must be moved to brokerage. They will send a letter to the client if it gets to that deadline, giving them 45 days to make a change, either to get actively trading again or to voluntarily move the accounts to brokerage. If your client agrees to getting them moved to brokerage, then we want to make sure we get the forms in place and not let that be an automatic move from home office. The Actions at a Glance report used to be called SPS Advantage Actions at a Glance, and it only included SPS Advantage accounts. That's no longer the case. As of September of last year, they started renaming that account in various market groups, and they've got everybody all now in the same reporting. It's called the Managed Accounts Actions at a Glance report, and it includes all forms of managed accounts to make sure that you're covering your review requirement for all of them. What that means is they have to be uploaded into OFM and tagged appropriately in order for that report to see that they've been done. So now that we've got a little bit of information about some of the recent changes and what exactly managed accounts are and why we're tracking them, let me introduce you to Marlo Russell. Hi, Marlo.
Hi, Brandy. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Marlo is the Client Service Manager for Jeff Wallace in Port Huron. She is in a smaller practice where it's just she and Jeff working together to take care of all of these things. She does a remarkable job of tracking the managed account reviews, and so she was a logical choice to speak with all of you today about her process and why it works well for her. So Marlo, I'm grateful for you joining us.
Thank you.
So I asked Marlo a few questions about how she keeps the tool populated, why it works well, what tips she might give you, and here are some of those questions and answers. Marlo, I asked, how do you keep the next meeting date filled with current dates? Because that's a gap we see sometimes in practices where they don't necessarily use that meeting date to help prompt them to know that the review is going to be needed soon. Can you share with everybody how you keep that filled so that it's not a project for you?
Yep. So when we need to reset the tool in January, I start by filling in all the pre-scheduled meeting dates that are already in Contact Manager. And then for those that are not yet scheduled, I just use the first of the month based on their target month. So for example, if they have a July GSF, then I would just use July 1st. And then as they get scheduled, I update them with the actual meeting date.
That makes it nice for you as the year progresses. You already know when to expect those reviews to be required.
Yep.
Great. So I asked you also when we were chatting what information you found helpful to capture in the tool, because you keep short but sweet notes in there. And can you share with those on the call today how you handle that?
Yep, so I keep short or minimal, but they're notes that are meaningful to me. In the details field, I mark the day that the review is uploaded to OFM and add my initials. I think that's just an automatic thing. I add my initials onto everything I do in a tracker. If a review wasn't completed on time, then I add some notes about why and if there are any next steps that I need to do.
That's extremely helpful if a client misses a meeting or if the advisor misses it coming out of the meeting, so that you can keep track of where you stand in getting that taken care of. Mm-hmm. I did include an example here of Marlo's notes. Marlo, you suggested that I put one in that's a little messier where you needed to take the next steps, and I didn't get that captured and in here on time, but you can see here's a great example of one that was done right on time, an active portfolio that she took care of the same day as the meeting. The review came out, it got uploaded, she closed it right away. She did absolutely everything in the process correctly. But there are a few, not a lot, of great examples in her managed account tracker, more around SPS, where you have to wait for trades or there's some other action needed before you can move forward with processing the review or completing it. So I'm sorry that I didn't capture that, but Marlo does a really good job of noting those things so that she knows exactly where she stands as she looks at her dashboard each day. one of the questions I asked you, because some practices aren't as motivated to stay on top of the tracking piece, they'll do the reviews, but they don't do a real good job of keeping on top of it, or it doesn't become a priority until later in the year. So I asked you, what helps you stay motivated to stay on top of tracking and do it as well as you do?
Well, when I hired into the practice in September, my advisor had been without a staff person for quite a while, and the deliverables were very behind. I had quite a long list of reviews to complete. So now this motivates me to never have to make a project of the annual requirements again, but to do it in smaller, more meaningfully timed pieces, such as with the CMOT.
It helps a lot. Helps a lot. You were behind in a number of things, not just managed accounts, because of the lack of staff for a while. So it kept you. You're probably more keenly aware of the pain of getting behind in some of those areas than some might be, because it happens more gradually for others.
Yeah, especially when the SPS, like the full review letters, were required last year too. So it was quite a project.
Yeah. So that's good for everybody to keep in mind as you're sympathizing with Marlo. She wasn't just doing review sheets. She was putting deliverables together in the last quarter as a brand new employee. So that was probably a little bit less than fun for you.
Yeah.
I asked what tips you'd provide to others in your position for those that are able to assist in this process.
Help your advisor stay prepared and on track with the reviews. If they don't do it when the meeting is held, it's not as easy to document the conversation accurately. I think it's more important to do it either in the meeting or shortly after to make the best use of his time and mine. I also do, with the case prep, I have a checklist. So I always know, like, at each meeting when we need to do it. So I usually ask right after the meeting, you know, if it's done or if he needs to do it. I set it in front of him, and just really helps keep him on track while it's still fresh in his mind.
Just like meeting notes, it's hard to go back to the content to know exactly what your conversation looked like if you don't get it done right away. So that's a great tip. The last question I asked that I've highlighted here is how you use the managed accounts actions at a glance report. I sometimes will have some pushback about the tracking piece. Why would we need to track it when we have the managed accounts actions at a glance report? And I thought your answer really captured the message that we like to deliver to practices. Would you mind sharing that?
I do see it as a safety net. It doesn't really prompt me to take care of it. It only reports what has and hasn't been done. The tracker reminds me that we need to do the review and keep track of what has been done. It keeps the whole client meeting experience integrated by using it with the other trackers.
I loved that answer. I told you that when you said it the first time around, and I'll reiterate that to everybody. Something that sometimes falls off the radar is how important it is to use this tracker specifically, because all of your other tracking is there and connect with it. So you're able to keep a better eye on the whole client experience and all the moving pieces together in one place. So really excited to hear you answer that. It means that what we've taught is working well for you, and I'm glad.
Thank you. It works great for me.
Good. Good. So when I asked about your process, you shared with me that you review the form during the client meeting prep. Excuse me, you prepare the review form during the prep so that he can fill it out wherever possible. So sometimes you outsource case prep, so you're aware, I'll touch on this in a second, that it's needed because they prompt you for that. But you also, because you do such a great job tracking, you know it in several ways. So you try to get that form in the folder for him so he can do it right there in the meeting. And then if it comes back out in the folder, you can put it back in front of him and say, oh, didn't put this. Don't forget, this has to be done so I can track it. And then you do a great job of verifying that everything's complete, getting it scanned, and tracking it right after the meeting, too. There's not often a delay for you. Can you speak to the difference, though, between when you do an active portfolio review and when there's an SPS review, that's a little bit different, isn't it?
Yep. If there's trades that he needs to do in the meeting, then that usually causes a delay, and that would be an example of when it's on the tracker, more than one day, I would say, after I've completed the CMOT. So that's where I add some additional notes and the details. What day, we had the meeting, about how long he thinks it'll take for the trades to settle, and that'll prompt me to check into it again, a few days later, ask them if they're done, double check them, and then do the letter form.
Perfect. I suppose that's probably even more so the case when there's buys and sells, because you've got to wait for one to settle before the next can happen. So keeping good notes helps you stay right on top of those.
Yep, so we had an example of that today. I think there's one on my tracker that's been there for a few days. I checked in with him today, and he said everything should be good to go, so I will double check it and do the letter and get it in front of him today.
And check it off the list.
Yep, close it out.
Perfect. So one of the advantages that you have that we talked about was that you do outsource, your practice does outsource your meeting preparation through KMG's outsourcing department. And it's handy because even though you've got it tracked and you're aware that it's coming up, they will also indicate the need for a review when you submit for the right meeting type. And because we recommend that the reviews happen during the investment review and rebalancing, or IRR, meeting, that prompts them to look to see if it's been done and let you know so that you can prepare it before the meeting if you haven't already. And they also do a good job of catching it later in the year. So in the second half of the year, if it's still not complete, even if you're having the other meeting type, the goal tracking meeting, they're going to let you know that it's not done. On the other hand, they'll point out if the review shows as complete so that you can double check your tracking. So kind of an extra added safety net for you in the outsourcing piece as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever find that I'm going to ask you a question I didn't tell you I was going to ask you, but I'm curious?
Uh-oh.
Warning, unprepared question. Do they ever catch you with some that you weren't aware or weren't ready? Or does that more often just confirm what you already knew?
When they do the case prep?
Yeah.
I don't think it happens that way because they don't show up on my tracker until the meeting date, and the case prep is done 3 weeks ahead of time, so they always know before it even shows up on my end, I guess.
Good.
Does that make sense?
It does. That's handy.
Yep. So it is very helpful that they have that extra safety net and point it out, and it's on the agenda. And when I'm doing all the case prep, it's right on my checklist, and I always know ahead of time. So it's very handy.
Very good. So as a best practice, the process is pretty simple. Prepare the form wherever possible, complete it in the meeting or immediately after, get it scanned and uploaded to OFM so that it's tagged correctly, and then track it, and then walk away from that. You don't need to worry about it. We do recommend that you use all the fields in the Managed Account Tracker accurately and completely. I've highlighted a few important ones here. The account type, you can use the drop-down menu that's available. Most of the sites that are out there for Connect have Active Portfolio, SPS, and the SMA label that I mentioned earlier for the separately managed accounts. If your advisor uses SPS Advisor and it is not part of your drop-down, please reach out and let us know. We'll make sure that that gets corrected so that you can be tracking the reviews for that as well. We do have the ability to edit that field if needed to include the appropriate account types for you. The target month. So if you're not using the target month, this one's one that will be helpful for you to learn about. That really should align with the investment review and rebalancing meeting. Or if you're using another meeting type, wherever the asset allocation or the rebalancing occurs in the year, we want to make sure that that's our target so that we get it done at the same time that this account is being discussed anyway. The next meeting field, Marlo mentioned she does a wonderful job of updating that and keeping it accurate so that she's aware of what should have already been done or what's coming. Update that with accurate target month meeting as soon as it's available. So for Marlo, she pre-schedules, so she's got a lot of those available earlier in the year. If you're scheduling a little bit closer, or they may be a client that you don't pre-schedule for whatever reason, once you get them scheduled, you can fill that in and use that information to your benefit. And finally, the details field is a great place to make notes that are meaningful to you and your process. Marlo does a wonderful job of keeping brief notes that indicate when she handled the review, that she is the one who made the note, or next steps and who is responsible for that. But your practice may need to capture different information, and we do encourage you to use the details in a way that makes the most sense for you to get the most value out of the information and keep you on track with the review. So some other best practice tips. Just because there's an annual review requirement doesn't mean that the advisor should only review the accounts one time a year, or that there should only be one rebalancing that occurs. As a best practice, accounts should be reviewed more often than annually, especially if there's been no solicited trades for 18 months or more. The full requirement is 27 months in order to meet that deadline for not being moved to brokerage. But as a best practice, if your client hasn't been willing to make trades or hasn't been receptive to the trades that have been proposed for a year and a half, it's likely that the account may not be suitable anymore. So we need to be making more regular recommendations and observations on those accounts to determine appropriateness. As I mentioned before, if the client does agree to move the account to brokerage, don't just leave it to the home office. Don't let your advisor say, "Ah, it'll roll, don't worry about it." It absolutely should be done using the full product change form so that home office is aware that it's part of the process of reviewing with the client and that it wasn't a negligent move or an oversight on the part of the practice. And finally, submitting all managed account annual reviews to OFM. It may not be habit yet for you to send those to OFM and to tag them the appropriate way so that they get counted. If you're not sure, you should pull your managed accounts actions at a glance and see if they're showing up on that report as being completed. If they're not, then we can absolutely help you get those things tagged. You can re-tag them if they're tagged incorrectly, or get them tagged if they haven't gone to OFM so that they count for you. We do encourage you to reconcile the managed accounts tracker twice annually in April and October. We focus on two different things during those reconciliations. We want to verify that all the clients are on the list. So if they have opened a new account or switched account types, we want to make sure that the tracker reflects that. Or if they have closed an account or left managed accounts completely, that they're no longer on the list. And the other side of that is making sure that the status is correct, that home office shows them closed and you show them closed. Or if they still show them open, you can get to the bottom of why. Perhaps it wasn't tagged or there was an account missed. We want to get to the bottom of that in smaller chunks, and April and October give us good checkpoints for making sure that we still have time to get it taken care of as the rest of the year comes upon us. And then if needed, in the last quarter of the year, if you have a big list left in October when you do your reconciliation, or if you're like Marlo, who came into a practice who didn't have a staff before her for a while, there was a backlog of a number of things. So in that last quarter, she couldn't just check it once and verify it. She needed to stay on top of the tracking every month, all month, to make sure that everything was being done in plenty of time to get it recorded for the end of the year. So I'm going to ask you to participate here for a moment and ask you to use the raise your hand feature here in GoToWebinar, and let me know if some part of this is unfamiliar or if you're doing it a little bit differently. I'd like to hear from you. Nobody wants to talk to me. That's okay. I know somebody who will. Hey, Sarah. Hi.
Hello?
Can you hear me, Sarah?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. How would you say your practice is doing with getting on this system? Are there any gaps for you yet? Just to give everybody a little bit of background, Sarah's practice has been with practice management for less than a year, so they're definitely still implementing some of the things that we've heard about today.
Yeah, so we do our investment review meetings in the second half of the year. So I just started using this managed accounts tracker about a month ago, maybe a little more than a month. I do take almost the exact same process as Marlo does. I've been trying to keep all of the next meeting dates up to date, as well as the target month with their IRR meeting month. We also have another advisor that deals with a portion of clients of Corey's. So in the details section, I write his name to know that he primarily meets with those clients. So I know, you know, when recommendations and trades have been made in that account, if we need to complete the managed accounts template and submit it to OFM. We haven't submitted anything yet. We're like just starting to get all of these prepared and ready for the IRR meetings, but so far I haven't really come across anything that, you know, challenges the process.
Good.
So, yep, it's still very new to us, and we're still trying to get a hold of how we want to, you know, go on with this process. Because we used to do the SPS deliverable letters, and now that they have the template, that's a bit easier than sending out the letters. You know, we're just trying to grasp that, and you know,
it certainly is different.
Yeah. It's also a challenge trying to get Corey to fill out the information during the meeting. So it's just a new thing for everybody on our team.
Well, that's a common challenge, too, getting the advisor to change habits. So thanks for bringing that up, because that's an excellent point. Everybody should try to exercise patience, but certainly persistence in helping them build a new habit. And by preparing it in advance and making sure that it's on the agenda, that's a good way to help. And then, of course, holding them accountable post-meeting to doing it in a timely fashion if they didn't get to documenting the conversation.
Right.
There are a lot of advisors who have the conversation. That's not new to any of them. They're used to having the conversation around appropriateness and their recommendations and what's next for the client. They're just not used to documenting it in this way. So this can be a little bit of a retraining for everybody. Thanks for that, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any other comments around their process in their practice?
Brandy, this is Marlo. Could I add something kind of that you maybe think of?
Please.
Okay, when you mentioned the tagging incorrectly, you know, like an OFM.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many people you have that are newer than me, but another thing that that popped up when I had the large backlog of reviews to complete last year, a lot of them had been tagged incorrectly, and it took me a while to find out what that meant and how to fix it. Because like with the active portfolio reviews, they have a different name when you tag them. And there's also a choice for supporting documentation, which seems to make sense, but if you choose that, it will not get marked off the list with Home Office.
Ah. So that is an important detail to note, isn't it?
Yes. So so that's when I had to go back also and re-tag a lot of items because they had been marked as like SPS Advantage recommendations, but supporting documentation for those. And that doesn't, it wouldn't recognize that as a completed review. So I had to go in and actually re-tag those And they were, at first I thought they weren't done, but they were done. And once I found them, then I could retag them. So that was a whole learning experience for me as well that maybe someone else can avoid.
Thank you for that. It is a relief, though, to know that they were complete. You didn't have to start from scratch. You just had to find them. And it's not a hard process to relabel them, is it, Marlo?
No, not really. Nope.
You just
Nope. So once I
little
realized that it could happen, I just went through and looked for it first, and if it was there, then it's a quick retag.
That's good. Anything else you'd add to today's class?
Nope, that's just something I just thought of.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're a small group and a quiet one. So if we have any, I'll give you just a moment to write in if you've got any questions or raise your hand. And if you don't, feel free to do that while I move on to the next slide, but it's okay if you don't. Okay. I can get it to go. There you go. Okay, so before you leave, I'm going to be available until the 2 o'clock hour Eastern time. You may feel free to either shoot me an email at brandywithani.a.kelly, K-E-L-L-E-Y, @ampf.com, or give me a call directly at 248-218-1274 if I can help you in any way around this or direct you to the right person on our team. There will be a follow-up that comes out after this class in the next day or two with some handy resources and takeaways from today's class that'll serve as a great one-page resource for you to help remind you of some of the things that you learned today. And of course, as always, there's a survey that will appear after the class ends. Please take a few minutes to fill it out and let us know what you think. We want to know what we can continue to be doing better. And don't forget that you're each other's best resources. The more you share, the more we all learn. So if there's somebody on this call that you heard a name and you'd like us to connect the two of you so you can chat a little bit more, please let us know. We'd be happy to do that. So I thank you all very much for your time today and wish you a great afternoon.